Thank you all for coming today to join me for a new webinar. I have actually given this one at some of the libraries here in the county before, but it was a big hit, so I thought I would share this with you. And since we're moving into the cooler season when not as many people are outside or want to be outside, I thought that this was very timely. So, my name is Lisa Klein, and I am part of the Agriculture and Natural Resources team at UGA Extension in Gwinnett County. And of course, UGA Extension is an outreach organization, an arm of the University of Georgia, and we do whatever is necessary for the citizens of the county in which we were in. And in Gwinnett County, we do a lot of outreach, which means you guys get all sorts of great programming. And we love to share that with folks even outside the county. So if you have questions or there's something that you would love to see, some type of topic that you want a little bit more in-depth information on, or would just like to see somebody do some research on it and present it to you in an easy to digest way, I am happy to do that for you. I like doing that kind of stuff. So today we have windowsill herb gardening. So we're going to talk a little bit about different types of herbs that do well in a household situation. I know it does say windowsill herb gardening, but you can do herb gardening on your kitchen countertop. You don't have to have a window in your kitchen. I do actually have one behind me that is not snow. I'm hoping the snow stays away, but you can use LED lights. You can use all sorts of different, they're hydroponic type systems, and we'll talk a little bit about all of those. So as we're going through, I don't have a ton of slides. This one's a little slide light as compared to some of the others that I do. But if you have questions about anything that you see in this presentation, please go ahead and drop that in the chat box. If you would like to put down where you're from, if you are from outside of Gwinnett County, I'd love to hear where you're from, or even out of state, that'd be great. But don't feel obligated if you don't need to or would like to keep yourself secret. But I will go ahead and get started. So again, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop that in the chat box. And if you would like a copy of these slides, I'll have my email address on the very last slide, and you can get that there and then send me an email. It usually works better that way. I know some folks have registered, but not everybody has, so it's difficult for me to know who's who and who wants a copy, and better to keep your email address private. So if you can just email me from the email address on the last slide, that'll work best. All right, let's get started. So a lot of us love herbs. I recently did, I think it was 10 herbs or 10 different types of plants that you can use to make tea out of your backyard. And a lot of those were some of these very same herbs that you see here. So herb gardening, you use them in all sorts of different ways. You use them a lot in cooking. You may use it as tea. You may use it in tinctures and other things like that, if you're using like herbal medications and there's tons of different therapeutic uses, not to mention just the simple fact of having something green and growing on your windowsill that you can look at if it's cold and maybe snowy where you are, or just cold in general out there. It always makes you smile when you can see something green and growing in your windowsill. But there are a lot of benefits. So I know year-round freshness is a big plus. I mean, we can all go down to the grocery store. We go over into the refrigerated section, and they have those little clamshell containers that have, some cuttings of fresh herbs. And they're fresher than obviously the dried ones, but nothing beats being able to just walk into your sunroom, go to your windowsill in your kitchen or another part of your house, and just snip off some fresh herbs that you have growing there. And not only is there just a massive convenience factor, but it tastes a lot fresher. I mean, fresh herbs can be there's something about fresh rosemary versus dried rosemary. The flavor is just so much more intense, so you need a little less of those than you would of the dried. Again, the convenience is really close by. If you live in a really hilly neighborhood or you live way high up in a condo and you only have a little balcony, you don't want to have to walk down a long hill to go to your garden to get something. Or what if you forgot to get it at the grocery store? It's nice to have it right there. If you don't have much space, that's fine. You don't even have to have a balcony. We have a lot of folks that are in condos and they don't have balconies. They just have a sunny window, maybe, if you're lucky. And even if you don't have a sunny window, that's fine. You can use LED lighting. So it's very space efficient, and it's something that you can do grown right alongside your house plants, which is nice. And as I mentioned, the aesthetics of it. I mean, we all are here because I think we all like plants and we like how they look. So it's nice to be able to have green and growing things that are functional as well. So let's go into the herb selection. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the means, but these are some of the more popular herbs that you're going to find in cooking dishes in North America. So your typical Americanized cooking. Not to say that there aren't other types of herbs out there from other parts of the country who have a very diverse population here in Gwinnett County. And so a lot of those probably can be grown right here in your kitchen, under lights or in a sunny window. So I encourage you that even though you don't see maybe your favorite herb here, you can totally try that out. But basil's known for very rich aromatic, the essential oils that are in there. It makes great caprese salad where you cut it with mozzarella cheese, buffalo mozzarella, and tomatoes, a little balsamic. It's very tasty. You use it to make pesto. Cilantro, which is used in a lot of Hispanic cooking. If you taste the soap, did you know that you're actually in the majority and not the minority? Those of us that really like it actually are in the minority. A lot of people think it tastes like soap. Parsley, a kitchen staple used in a lot of soups, adds kind of a fresh spring to maybe potato soup or something like that. And this is a very easy one to grow. It's also a host plant for butterflies. So if you have some and it's getting a little straggly, you can go plant it outside. The butterflies appreciate that. Chives. So chives have kind of that oniony flavor, and you can snip off just what you need, maybe for a little soup or something like that. You can put it in salads. Thyme, that's also another good one. Very great with meats, pairs very well with those, and having it close by is very nice and beneficial. Also has some medicinal properties. So there is that. Again, I mentioned I just recently did a tea webinar where I went through all sorts of therapeutic and medicinal uses of plants that you have in your backyards, including herbs like these. So thyme was one of those listed. And you can get that recording on our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. And then there's sage, again, very handy in stews and meats, and very savory. And then you have rosemary, one of my favorites. I use it a lot on smashed potatoes, and it's great in like an egg hash brown casserole with a little bit of sausage. And then you have oregano, used a lot in Italian, Mediterranean style dishes. And you can infuse it in some oils. If you have some olive oil, you can put some oregano in there and infuse that. And then you have mint, which mint is very good and very tasty, but keep it in a container. It's not great when you grow it out there in your garden. It can get invasive. But if you're using it for cocktails or you like it in your tea, it's great if you can grow it inside right there where you can grab a sprig if you need it, and you don't have to go outside or into a container to get it. And then tarragon, which is used a lot in French cooking, and it has kind of a little bit of a licorice flavor. So all of these do really well in a situation where you're growing it in your kitchen or another sunny windowsill throughout your house, or maybe under LED lights, grow lights. All right, so let's look at herbal light needs. So I've got it kind of color coded here for you. If you see the yellowish green, that's full sun or full light needs. It needs like 6 to 8 hours, so it needs quite a bit of light. Part to full sun, about 4 to 6 hours worth. That's kind of that orangey color. And then part to, sorry, that should be part to shade, or not much sun at all, 3 to 6 hours. That's a typo. I apologize. And that's going to be your green. So you can get by if you don't have a lot of light at all on the cilantros and parsleys of the world. But those that need quite a bit of light, that's going to be basil. Um, Needs fairly well draining. It comes up really easily from seed. It's one of those that I use a lot if I'm doing a workshop or something like that because it comes up so readily and so easily. And you can just put it in your sunny windowsill. It likes moist soils, but you don't want it floating around in there. And then you have thyme. It takes a little bit longer to germinate and to get up to the size that you would need, but it's pretty drought tolerant once it's actually established. So again, it needs fairly intense sunlight. So if you're going to grow it in a sunny windowsill, let's say you've got a southern exposure, it's perfect for that. And then sage, this one can get kind of big, so you're gonna have to be doing a lot of pinching back on it, but it also likes full light. And I'll talk more about when we get to water needs, but I do want to make a note, and I like to repeat so that you actually think about that. Try to group like water needs. So it's the same thing as if you're growing stuff outside in your garden bed. You want plants that have similar water needs grouped together. So if you want 3 pots on your windowsill, try to choose things with same light needs and same water needs. And then we have rosemary. So rosemary is pretty drought tolerant as well. You know, it can tolerate a wide range of light, although it does, and you can see it does say light full, but it can tolerate a little less light. So, although that's not really on there, we're moving down in tolerance level. So it's a little, the closer we get to the orange or the full to part sun, that means it's tolerant of a little less sunlight. And then oregano, of course, and we have sandy kind of loamy soils. Remember, if you're growing them all in the same pot, they all have to be very similar in needs for soil. If they're just similar in light needs, then you can grow them in separate pots. Some might need more arid, some might need more moisture. So if you have all the same light needs, but different moisture and soil needs, you can grow them in separate pots. And then as we move further down, we have tarragon. So that's kind of partial sun, chives, partial, mint. That's going to be partial. And then cilantro and parsley need the least amount of light out of all of those, so 3 to 6 hours. Although they are tolerant of more sunlight, so they're just they have a wide variety of the amount of light that they need. All right, water and watering needs and growth. So not all of these are gonna, it's based on the type of information I can get out of research when I do this. But let's look at water needs. So here I've got it coded by moist and dry. So I mentioned before, if you're going to group them by light needs. That's your first thing that you're going to group by. And then if you're looking at what else, you want to group by water needs. So if you're going to put them all in the same pot, you really need to figure out and group by water and soil, because you don't want something that needs a lot of water along with something that doesn't need much water. So if you're going to do that, then put them in separate pots, which is absolutely fine, because you'll see some pictures where it looks absolutely beautiful if you have a collection of a bunch of little pots, and you can get creative. So basil, moist but not completely dry. You don't want to waterlog it, but it is happier if it's moister with a lot of sun. Cilantro, evenly moist. It doesn't really like to be dry, and it is not really drought tolerant. It'll wilt. So make sure that it is getting the type of water that it needs. Parsley, it doesn't really like dry soil. So you also want to keep it fairly evenly moist. It's very similar in water needs to cilantro. Chives, moist but not soggy, but a little more tolerant of less water. So again, as we're moving down out of the blue and into the yellowy green, the yellow to the green, that's going to tell you that you need less and less water as you get down the list. And then you've got thyme, that is fairly drought tolerant. Sage, again, pretty drought tolerant. And what you'll note is a lot of these are found in more arid climates. So A lot of these are going to be used in Mediterranean or Italian style cooking, more desert type, if you want to think about it that way, but they're more drought tolerant. So you once they're established, you don't have to water them a lot, which is kind of nice. All right, and then you move on down to fast growers. So, as I mentioned, mint can actually be fairly invasive if you don't have it in a container. So you just have to be aware of that. And it does great in a container, which is fine, and it keeps it nice and contained. Similarly, if you are going to grow it outside, because sometimes people grow tired of growing something in a pot in the house and they're like, yeah, I'll throw it outside. Be careful with mint because it will establish itself in your compost pile and then you'll have a heck of a time trying to get rid of it. So, if you do want to move it outside, that's absolutely fine. It's a perennial here, it'll come back every year. Keep it in the container. And it grows very fast, which is one of the reasons why it's considered invasive. So mint does like evenly moist soils. But again, I'm just keeping the red here a little bit as a stoplight or stop sign, as in just be wary. These can grow fairly fast, and tarragon also, although not nearly as invasive as mint. And honestly, some of the others like oregano can grow faster too if it's fairly happy where it is. So just be wary of that. All right, getting started. So, the things that you want to look at when you're trying to decide where to put your herbs. Now, I did mention if you don't have a south facing window or a western facing window, that's okay. They make grow lights for a reason and they're super cheap. You can go on Amazon and pick one up for 12 bucks. And it'll either stick in the pot or it'll have a little platform and then it kind of, loops up and you can put it over the top. They have timers in them. So they're usually set for like 8 hours, 12 hours, maybe 4 hours. So based on light needs, and you can, if you're not in a very intense window and you just have some indirect light, you can put it on for whatever the light needs, and then it just flips off when it's done. So really easy, very handy, super cheap, and it's not really that ugly looking. You can just turn it on during the day and it gives it a little bit more intense light. So make sure that you're choosing a space where if you have that bright sun, you definitely want to grab it and put your herbs there if you can. So, but if you can't, a western facing window is good. Try to stay away from the eastern facing ones. The light won't be as intense. But if you only have that, that's okay. You can just go for that grow light and then select a container. So here you can do whatever you want. I am a fan of picking off the wall interesting containers. You can see in this little picture here, we've got somebody that's using a coffee cup, and then you've got a couple of other little planters. I mean, you can go to the Goodwill store and you can look around on the shelves and see what you find there, and then just kind of group them by color, group them by shape. There's all sorts of different things you can do. I mean, the sky's the limit. If you're curious and you're not sure, you can just go and search online and just, type in windowsill herb garden or windowsill herb garden containers, and you will get pictures after pictures after pictures of all sorts of stuff to inspire you in what you want to choose. So quality soil, always choose new soil. Don't go out there and dig soil in your backyard. You'll bring all sorts of organisms in that you don't necessarily want, especially if you're starting seeds. You don't want to introduce bacteria or fungi or anything like that. So always go for just purchasing a bag of either seed starter or potting soil, and that's been sterilized, so you don't have to worry about that. So it's also, if you look for one that's got complete, like maybe Miracle Grow, that's going to have fertilizer in it, so you don't have to worry about doing anything, at least for the first year, unless you go plant stuff outside and then just start over with new soil. Planting with care, so transplanting those herbs in pots. Try to choose something that's going to be big enough, like that you don't have to worry about it getting too big or too, overgrowing the container it's in. Maybe you have like, I've seen people that get these little sauce containers. They're really small, and they've started seeds in that. It's probably about the size of one of those peat pellets, and that's a good starter, but that's not sufficient to support that plant going forward. So If you want to start things in a peat pellet or you want to start things in one of those and then move it over to a different container, that's fine. But don't expect to keep it alive for very long in a tiny little container. It needs to be big enough. Um, let's see, watering. So again, make sure, and I did group them by water needs. So make sure that you are watering according to what they need. So you can write it on the pot, get a little sticky note and put it on the back, put it on the sticky note if you're not sure, and stick it to the back. I mean, these webinars are informative for anybody who's interested and wants to learn more. I don't want anybody to be intimidated and think that they can't grow stuff. So I offer my webinars. I try to put all sorts of information in there, and I offer the slide deck for those that are interested and want to keep that for reference. So if you want that slide deck, remember, you can always email me. I'm happy to share it. So you want to make sure you're watering wisely. You don't want root rot. A lot of these containers are not going to be naturally draining, so you do need to be careful about that. There are plastic inserts that you can buy that will fit down into containers in general. You might consider something like that. We'll go into a little bit about how to water. There are some interesting ways of doing that, but you want to be aware that they're not as draining as a normal pot would be, or holding a reservoir of water to water that plant. Feeding, so you still have to fertilize. Usually that potting mix that you've used, as I mentioned, is going to have some fertilizer in it, but that's exhausted fairly quickly. So just make sure that if you have a very full pot like these are here on this page, that you are regularly feeding those plants so that they have the micronutrients and the macronutrients they need. And then pruning. So the whole point of having them is so you can use them, right? Plant the ones that you're going to use most often in your cooking or herbal teas or things like that. Pinch them back, use them. And that'll help encourage them to be a bit bigger and bushier instead of tall and spindly. And it's going to help keep everything healthier. And it'll constantly give you a supply of fresh green growth. So, general care. As I've mentioned before, I like to repeat just because sometimes people, forget the importance. If you're new to gardening, no shame. But there are things that you need to know if you want your plants to be happy. I have killed my fair share of plants. That's okay. It happens to the best of us. I'm just trying to help you so you don't kill a whole lot, as many as I have. So, light requirements. Know which ones need the most sunlight versus which ones need the least amount. Plant them together, as I've mentioned a couple times, like sunlight requirements. So that is your major thing. Don't put something that isn't happy in full sun with something that needs full sun. One's going to look burnt and crispy, and the other one's going to be thriving, and then you're going to be dissatisfied with how it looks. Rotate them. So move those pots around because plants will stretch. They'll if you're not using a grow light and sunlight's not as intense as it should be, they're going to start stretching towards the sunlight in the window. So you're going to move those around so that you kind of offset some of that. You don't want them to be leggy. You don't want them to look ugly. You're going to do your pinching and other things and make sure that you're moving around so that they get the sunlight they need. Optimal sun exposure. Again, really, you should have a minimum of 5 hours. There are some that'll tolerate a little less, but if you could get more, that's great. And again, you can always use an LED light. They're not that expensive. And as I mentioned, don't worry about it if you don't even have a window at all. Maybe you want to put them in your bathroom. That's fine. LED, there's lots of little growth setups that you can have that will keep everything looking great. In fact, there are some that prefer to be moist. Off that path of herbs, you can get some that really like ferns, staghorn ferns, and some others that really need a lot of moisture and do best when they're in a very humid environment, which is not what we live in, nor is it in our office. So in a bathroom, that's actually a good thing because you're taking showers and all of that moisture that's in there. So they really appreciate that and they tend to do well. And some of these, like basil, do prefer moister environments. So don't, if all you have is your bathroom, grow them in there too. And you can use the LEDs to do that. So grow lights, there's a lot of different types. And, you can buy pretty much anything. So LED lights or grow lights, like they're kind of synonymous now. You can use fluorescents, but you have to make sure you have the correct spectrum. But most of what you're going to buy out there now are all going to be LEDs, which means that they're very energy efficient. They don't put out heat really to speak of, and they've got the correct wavelengths of lights in there that plants need. I'm not going into a lot of what plants need. This is more just an overview so that you know all the options. I have other webinars which will talk about, what plants need. If you're curious, it's red and blue wavelengths. So some of them will have a fancy adjustable light spectrum. I have some that I can click a little button on it, and I'll get more red, I'll get more blue. I can have all red, all blue. It's an adjustable light spectrum, so you can customize it. And then some of them have very little heat output. So you can also get, if you're concerned or you live in a northern climate, if you happen to be watching this and you do have snow, you can actually get warming mats that you put underneath here, or you can get hydroponic setups that will keep the water temperatures warmer. Spectrums. So you're going to look for a full spectrum LED light, and it'll tell you that. And it's got a mix of all of those white, red, and blues mixed together. And that's optimal for most plant growth. It's not just for herbs. So you can use it for other stuff. If you get tired of herbs, you can always put something else in there. Make sure that those lights are going to be about 6 to 12 inches above the herbs, and this is when they're mature. So if you're going for seedlings, that's going to go for just what you would do for starting seeds. So make sure it's only a couple inches above those seeds. As they germinate and as they start to grow, you're going to move that light a little further up and always maintain a couple inches above those seedlings so they don't get really tall and leggy and stretch. You want them to start to kind of fill out. And when they do that, that's when you can start to move that light further away. But if you're purchasing the plant as it's already semi-lush and good, like you get a 4-inch pot at the big box store or something like that, this is perfect. That's where you keep it about 6 to 12 inches away. Um, so most herbs need a lot of that light. It says 12 to 16 hours. I said the minimum is going to be like 8 hours for some of those herbs. They can tolerate a lot more light. So think about what it's like out in the summertime, where it is literally light for 12 to 16 hours a day. Maybe not intense sunlight, but it is light. So most of them, or most of the ones that we like to use in our cooking or herbal teas, are going to be needing that much light. Also note that versus sunlight, if you have stuff out on your balcony or someplace else outside, your evaporation rates are a lot lower inside because again, those LED lights are not warm. They really just are temperature neutral. So they're going to reduce that water evaporation. You won't have to water as much. Fluorescent grow lights. So I mentioned this was the other option. They're very cost effective. Again, they don't use a lot of energy either. Harder to find now than they were because before LEDs, that was pretty much like what we had. But now you'll find that fluorescents are probably not as widely available. They're still out there. And if you go on Amazon, you can search by fluorescent grow light and you'll get a bunch of options. But generally speaking, you're probably going to have less of an issue if you're brand new at this at just purchasing an LED light, grow light. So if you're wanting or you have a setup already, your light type is going to be compact fluorescents or T5 fluorescent tubes. So they are a little different than some of the typical fluorescents that you would use in your house. So you have to make sure that's the type that you use because it's going to have the correct wavelengths. It's going to put out the correct wavelengths. Also, you can put reflective light surfaces nearby, and that can increase the amount of light waves that the plants are getting. And you might need to adjust it a little bit. So like I said, your plants are going to grow tall and they're going to stretch towards the light source. So you need to pinch them off or snip them. And this goes for any plant. So again, if you get tired of herbs, you don't want to deal with it, You can always put, there's an aloe here and an ivy and maybe a couple succulents. You can always put something else in there. So lots of choices. All right, general care. So container choice. You can put these in anything, anything. You can see there's some really cute little kitty and puppy uh, pots up there. Now, those aren't very big, but they're really cute and they sell well. I mean, if you look for stuff like this, you can find all sorts of really cute pots that are out there. Maybe you have some that you had other stuff in and those plants died. Mix and match. I mean, throw them up there in your windowsill and put some herbs in them. Just make sure that they're sufficient in size, at least probably 4 inches or so for your plants. Drainage, you really want to have a drainage hole in there so that it can drain out. I understand that sometimes that's not going to happen, and you don't want the pot that you have. You don't want to try to put a hole in it to do that. So just don't do like maybe you're thinking, oh, I'll just put some rocks in the bottom of it and then I'll put my potting soil on top. Don't do that. That's an old wives' tale. Let me tell you why. So when you do that, thinking that you're going to water your soil and it's going to drip down and then drip down into the stones and then your plant will sit there on top. Well, what actually happens is you get some surface tension there between those rocks and the soil. And so when that soil is waterlogged, it has to actually reach like almost a maximum saturation before it'll start to drip down into and through those stones. And your plants, the roots are going to grow down in there anyway if it becomes root bound or pot bound. So I don't just leave the stones out. You don't need to do that. Go ahead and just put the potting soil in all the way down there. If you do have a drainage hole and you don't want the water or the soil, I should say, to drain out, you can use a coffee filter at the bottom, and that'll help water drain out if necessary, but keep the soil in. So just a little thought. You can put, if you need to have some type of a humidity area around that pot, you can put a tray like you see up in the top picture, and you can put pebbles there and you can keep water in there. And what that'll do is that's like a humidity chamber, if you want to think about that. And it looks cute too. You can use river stones or pumice or river rocks or whatever, and put that there. And that'll help keep keep the humidity up around there. And also it acts as a drainage tray for when you water, and that'll drip down through there and it'll just get into the stones down there and it'll evaporate into the house. It can help with a really dry house as well. So materials, you can do all sorts of different materials. I mean, the sky's the limit here. Plastic, ceramic, terracotta, metal. I mean, just know that with metal and without a liner, eventually it'll probably rust. But yeah, there's all sorts of options. Some of these are more drainable than others. Terracotta tends to sweat, so it won't, it'll dry out a little quicker, but that's fine. Um, but yeah, all of these are options. I mean, like I said, you can use anything. You don't need to stick with your certain type of pot. Shapes, I mentioned anything. I mean, sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want to do. It's perfectly fine if you want to be whimsical, like with these cats and dogs, you can do that. If you want to be very matchy and monochromatic with all white or all black or gray, whatever, you can totally do that too. It's basically what your personality has. And then you can choose containers that fit on your windowsill. So if you don't have a really wide windowsill, go with really narrow. You can get, maybe some leftover soup cans that you take the labels off of. I mean, anything, just something really wide and flat or something very narrow. And then portability. So you probably don't want something too big. It would take a lot to be too big to not be able to move it around, but usually lightweight is better off. It's easier to keep things watered. If you go on vacation for a week and you come back and you forgot to water stuff, it's nice if you can go over and put it in the sink, and just a sink full of water and allow it to absorb some of that water, and then you don't have to worry about it going forward. Soil, again, go for a well-draining mix. A soilless mix is usually what we recommend. So you can do just a regular old potting mix, or if you're starting seeds, you can do a seed starting mix and something that's specifically for containers. Don't get garden soil. It'll usually say garden soil on there. And if you can get something that has um, a good fertilizer that's kind of impregnated in there with macronutrients and micronutrients, that's good. That'll keep your plants going for at least a year, year and a half. Just know that, you will have to fertilize because if the growth starts really, getting out of hand, those plants are going to use those nutrients. So, or if you use a lot of your herbs and you're constantly watering and trying to get them to grow, you want to provide the extra nutrients. Texture, so you want to mix, or you want to have the type of mix in your pot that your plant needs. So if you're dealing with something that is a more arid plant, rosemary, sage, tarragon, some of those, choose more of a succulent mix because that's going to be more suitable for a cacti or a succulent. It drains a little bit better. It's meant for more desert-like plants. So make sure you're choosing a soil that's suitable for whichever herbs you want to grow. Moisture retention. So some, as I mentioned, like basil needs a high moisture soil. You may opt for a potting mix that has some of those hydrogels in it, and that will help keep that water content in that soil so that you don't have to water as often. And then in the last and probably the most important, sterile and pest free. So I know a lot of people insist on reusing soil over and over again, and maybe you haven't been burned by that. But if you try to start seeds and maybe it was sitting outside, you will eventually get burned because you're going to end up with damping off. That's a fungal infection where you try to start seeds and you have these spindly little seeds without their true leaves, and then you get a fungal infection and the whole stem collapses and you lose the entire plant. So save yourself the heartache and just buy yourself some seed starting potting mix. Start new every time and sanitize in between. So if you've got some pots and you went on vacation for 2 weeks and your house sitter forgot to water them and they died, toss out the soil, dunk it in some bleach solution, and then just start over from scratch. Get yourself some seeds, start over from scratch. You'll be much happier and you won't have to worry. And honestly, it's really not that expensive to get soil. You can get it pretty much anywhere now, including dollar stores. General care. So starting them again, pretty much any of the herbs. Some of them take a little bit longer. Some of them are easier. I love basil. Parsley is a good one too. Transplants, if you want an Insta garden, for those folks that maybe you're just trying to make it look pretty, or you immediately want functional. I mean, I know you can buy them at the grocery store, and those are great. Just buy them and stick them into your another pot. Put them on your windowsill. That's fine. I'm not going to tell anyone. So those are great if you want an instant garden. Herb types, like I said, just try to figure out what you use most when you're cooking and like light needs. And then you can put the individuals in different pots. You can see there we have a nice lineup of all sorts and they're labeled very nicely. Someone used canning jars, and then you have your soup cans. Those work great too. And don't forget about the other plants. You can make microgreens. So if you use a lot of those, you can grow those. Legumes, tomatoes. I've seen that. If you've got a big sunny window, you can try those. I mean, they're great. They're perfect for about 70 degrees. So if you've got a nice sunny window, maybe in a sunroom or something like that, here in the South, you can do that. All sorts of stuff. Space consideration. So seeds require less initial space, but eventually they're going to have to be repotted. So don't be scared of trying to start your own seeds. I'll have another webinar in January. I usually have the same one in January. That way you can always have ask your questions, but don't be intimidated by starting your own seeds. It's not that hard. And lots of options for seeds that you can't buy at the big box stores, but you do have to transplant eventually. So that's okay and totally doable. Don't worry about it. And cost. Seeds are very cost effective. You can try all sorts of different types of herbs that maybe, like I said, you can't find at the store. You buy them in the seed catalogs. I mean, they're on available all the time. You can get really interesting heirloom seeds. You can get them off Etsy. You can get them off Amazon. There's all sorts of other seed companies. Lots of good options for that. All right, watering needs. So, how do you know when you're supposed to water? Well, first, you should know your water needs of whatever it is that you're planting or trying to grow. So once you know that it doesn't need a lot of water, some people are very obvious, like, oh, it's wilting. It needs it needs some water. Okay, yes. But if you're trying to get it before it gets to that stage, you can do the finger test. There's grandma's way, which is put your finger in there, and if you can stick it in there, and it's up to the first knuckle or so, and it's dry, then it's time to water. So that's the one that grandma would have taught you. If you don't want to do that, you see that nifty little tool down there at the bottom of the page. That's called a moisture meter, and that works perfectly well. Don't worry about grandma's knuckle. And if it was dry, that will tell you if you need to water or not. Don't leave it in there because it will corrode. But yeah, it works perfect in telling you if it's in the green, it's moist. You don't need to do anything. If it's too wet, it'll be in the blue. And if it's too dry, it'll be in the red. Easy peasy. You don't want to overwater because that can cause root rot. I mentioned a lot of these containers. If you choose something that does not have a drainage hole, you have to be real careful about that. You don't want to overwater. So in that case, if you're not real familiar with moisture needs, use that moisture meter. It'll tell you, just push it all the way down in there. It'll tell you if you need to water or not. Humidity, I mentioned a humidity tray. So if you do have a drainage hole in there, maybe you're using terracotta pots, you can buy those long trays and put some pebbles in there and then set your pots on top of that. Acts great for drainage and will provide humidity help in the case where maybe it's a little too dry and arid in your house. You'll have a kind of a little bubble or microbe around your plants. Okay, fertilization. You want a balanced fertilizer. So when I say balanced, that usually means um, all purpose, kind of a water soluble, usually easier to do. You mix it, put it in a jug, use it over time. Something that's going to be like a 10-10-10. So that's going to be your three letters that are going to be on your bottle or your bag of fertilizer: nitrogen, potassium, or sorry, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the big three. Those are the ones the plants need the most of. And then anything else, those are going to be your micronutrients where they need varying lesser amounts of those. Calcium, magnesium, sulfur, those kinds of things. Those will be also on the bag. So if you get a complete fertilizer, it will have all of that in there. But make sure that whatever you're getting has the most of the NPK percentages of those elements. So less is more. You don't want to over fertilize with nitrogen because you're going to get a lot of green growth. So the nitrogen, or the N part of that, goes for your green growth. The P, or the phosphorus, that's going to go for roots, fruits, and that kind of thing. And then the K, the potassium, that's going to help with the metabolism and some of the roots of the plant, and some of the flowers. So the greeny growth, if you want a lot of that, nitrogen, and then the other two are for metabolism, roots, and fruits. And timing is key. You want to make sure you're doing it regularly. You don't want lots of spindly growth and then nothing. And you don't want to forget about fertilizing and then focus on soil quality. So always having a really good, rich, humusy mix is a good thing. That makes it easier for the root system to grow through it. And you don't have to worry about the nutrients. So yes, you do have to repot periodically. General care, pruning or pinching. So that's going to keep them at a sizable level where they don't get out of hand, which is good. You want to make sure that you're harvesting regularly. I mean, that's the whole reason you put them in there in the first place. You want to use them for your cooking and enjoy them. They look pretty, but they also should be functional. So make sure you're harvesting regularly. And if you go through a fit where you're not really cooking or anything, give them to your friends or dry them. That's okay too. You want to prevent flowering. So a lot of these herbs may prefer cooler weather. They don't want real hot weather, or they're just getting older. Pinch those flowers because that's them trying to complete their life cycle. They also start to get really woody about that point. So basil, cilantro, those kinds of things. Pinch those flowers off, and that will help keep them more compact and prevent them from getting woodier and their flavor kind of being off. Stimulate new growth. So pinching, same thing on the flowers outside. That's going to help get them to put out more new green growth, keep that bushier appearance, which is what you want for your windowsill or in your kitchen. You don't want them really tall and out of control. You want them like smaller and easier and prettier. Pest management, yes, you still can get pests in your house. So fungal issues, there's spores everywhere. You bring them in from other places. It just is. You're probably going to want to go organic because you are planning on eating these, right? Or at least most people are. So fungal diseases, if you let it get a little too wet, you may get some root rot, but you can use neem oil, you can use insecticidal soap, that kind of stuff. That'll help deter fungal issues. Root rot, so I always tell folks if you've got a choice, if some plants in a nursery and you look at them and one's looking a little off, pull it out of the pot and look at it. Those roots should be nice and white. It should smell good and humusy. If it smells a little rotten or off, you might be dealing with some root rot and you don't want that plant. Even if it's the last one, just leave it. You don't want to bring that home because then you're dealing with how much root do I have to cut off? Is there some that's still good? Yeah, just leave that one there. Inspect your plants pretty regularly. Look for wilting, look for yellow leaves. Maybe it's been in the pot for a while and you start noticing some odd discoloration. Could be a nutrient deficiency. There are infographics online that you can look at. If you put up plant nutrient deficiency, you'll get, usually it's a little hand-drawn plant and it's got different colors on the leaves and it'll show you what the different nutrient deficiencies look like. Very common in potted plants, very easy to correct. Just get yourself a complete fertilizer. Use clean pots and soil. So remember, you don't want to bring that disease in. Don't reuse the soil, dump it outside. Use sterile pots, wash them in bleach, Lysol, rinse them really well, let them dry, and new soil because that soil has been sterilized. Promote that air circulation, so don't put them too close together. I know it looks good when they're all, really close, but it also promotes pests and it also promotes disease. So you don't, same thing with outside, make sure there's enough space in between for airflow and water wisely. So you don't want to overwater. It'll complete those. It will allow for damp conditions, and then you can get fungus gnats, which those are really annoying. But you can use BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, to get rid of that. And it is safe to eat if you've treated it that way. But they are annoying, so just don't overwater. Allow it to dry out a little bit in between. Okay, creative uses, infused oils and vinegars. These are just a lot of different thoughts for what you can use all of those herbs for. So if maybe you got a bumper crop and you just can't cook with them all, do some things with them. I mean, here's a list of some really good stuff. So you can get some olive oil and you can put rosemary or basil or even lavender in there and infuse that oil for use in salads or cooking. Herb butter, chop it up really good. Get yourself some good quality butter. Mix it all together when the butter is softened and then store it. And then you can use that on crusty bread. That sounds really good. I haven't had dinner yet, so I'm hungry. But that's beside the point. Herb teas, as I mentioned, I just had that 10 plants that you have in your backyard that you can use for herbal teas. So you can brew mint and chamomile, lemon balm, all of that kind of stuff. It's different than the Camellia sinensis bush, the camellias that produce the white tea and black tea and yellow tea and green tea. Those have caffeine, but herbal teas typically don't. And they're all sorts of stuff like this. They can be mixed in with the white tea and the others for an infusion. But yeah, I mean, you can make some herbal teas, fresh herbal teas. You can put it in ice cubes. That's a really easy way that people have fresh herbs if you don't want to deal with it. So you cut it up and put it in an ice cube tray and put some water in there, some oil, stick it in your freezer, and then you can just grab one and throw it in there. Really easy. Skincare, I mean, people will make balms and those are really soothing for if you've got a burn or something like that. Bath salts, uh, scrubs, all sorts of stuff. I mean, you can go to sell stuff at the farmer's market if you want to do that. Wreaths and bouquets, very creative. You can make a new wreath, very aromatic. Pestos and salsas, sauces, garnishes for cocktails and drinks, and herb infused syrups, things like that. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can use. You don't have to give them away to people, all your herbs, if you have a lot. I mean, you can go all sorts of crazy on making all of these really interesting concoctions. So you can also preserve your herbs. So if you choose to dry them, you're going to do better if you use a food dehydrator. Those aren't that expensive. You can probably get one for 40 to $80. Uh, they're going to dry really fast. It's going to be much more controlled than it is if you hang them up in your kitchen or your pantry or wherever, and then you don't have to worry about running into them. So consider a food dehydrator if you're going to do that. And then just store in an airtight container. You can freeze them, so chop them up and put them on an either with ice cube trays, or you can just put them on a cookie sheet and stick them in the freezer and then put it in a Ziploc bag. My mom used to do that with parsley all the time. And then she'd pull it out and put it in her soups and things. Herb salts and sugars, you can do that with lavender. That's done a lot for like a sugar scrub or something like that. You have that for herbal seasonings. And then the vinegars, as I mentioned, herb butters, refrigeration. You can wrap them in paper towel, kind of like you go down to the store and you get that little clamshell that has the herbs in there. You can do that too. Cooking. So again, you can use that herb butter and you can put whatever herbs you want in there or whatever mixture of herbs you want. Soups and stews, I mean, lots of options there. Salads, fresh herbs, give it a real zingy flavor. Cocktails, there's a lot of really good cocktails. I mean, I'll go out with some friends. Do a little social drinking and I'm always looking for a new cocktail. And I've tried a couple that really surprised me, some that had basil in there. Never thought I'd like that, but it was really tasty. Flavoring grains and rices like wild rice, herbs, herb pastes. You can make your own herb pastes and savory bakes, things like that. Salad dressings, infused desserts, that kind of stuff. So what else can you grow? There's a lot of stuff that you can grow. So allium family crops, those are like onions. Leafy greens, your little spinaches, microgreens, legumes, beans and peas. Yes, you can grow garden plants in your house. Small root vegetables like radishes. I mean, you can see tomatoes there in a windowsill. And flowers, of course, if you want something that looks really pretty in the wintertime. Maybe you're from Minnesota and it's really dark and cold there, and you're looking for something to kind of spruce up the window. So lots of options. You don't have to stick with just herbs. And then hydroponics, we're going to kind of whiz through this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. There's other options for webinars if you want to learn more about that. So the pros, you're going to get a faster plant growth because you usually have some type of a nutrient solution that's going to help provide that plant with the nutrients it needs. Water conservation, you're not going to use a lot of water. You're not constantly watering them. The solution's right there. It can use it as it's needed. Cleaner harvest, you don't have dirt. You don't have to worry about that. And less need for pesticides. There are no soil or the gnats, the annoying little gnats. You don't have to worry about them. There are some others that you do, but different pests. Cons, you do have a lot to learn because it's completely different growing that in a nutrient solution. And the setups can be kind of expensive. So you really, maybe if somebody gives you a system, it's worthwhile learning about it and trying it out. But buying one yourself is really expensive unless you've got the money. Maintenance, you do have to watch. A lot of monitoring water levels, evaporation rates in the wintertime can be higher. pH balance, I mean, if you're an aquarium enthusiast, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's hard to keep the balance, but totally doable. And electricity, if the power goes out, your plants might have an issue. You might be over there dumping the nutrient solution in there yourself. Space, there are some compact ones, but there are also some very large ones. So you have to be aware of that. All right, just this is more for informational purposes. Again, we're not going into it, but these are the different types of hydroponic systems, just the broad overview and cost wise. So green is pretty low cost, yellowish, kind of medium, and red is high. So a jar, and we'll look at photos of these, but you've got the sweet potato in the jar, super easy, very low cost, and you can get the seedlings off of that to plant in your garden. The Kratky method, no pumps, it's just literally a cup with the roots and some nutrient solutions. A wick system, very useful in a lot of potting situations. I actually use that in my own houseplants, where you add a wick that's actually tucked up into a plant that nests within another, and the water will wick up. You can put nutrient solution in there if you would like. I don't always, a lot of times it's just water, but it helps in a situation where you're trying to keep your plant moist. You have deep water culture, so that can be, like an aquarium, plants, lettuce, herbs, leafy greens is what does best there. Garden cube and arrow garden, if you've looked up those, and you will look at pictures in a second. Ebb and flow. That's where you have like clay pellets and the nutrient solution will come up and surge, and then it'll trickle down through, and then it'll pump it back up and it'll do that. So you have some electrical cost. Then you have nutrient film technique, and that's where it's constantly solution with flowing, and you have nutrients and you have pH, and it's usually kind of expensive. Aeroponics, roots are suspended in the air and kind of misted with a solution. So that's probably more something if you know a lot about these kinds of systems, or you have a more commercial setup. And then you have these vertical setups and green walls and towers that look very impressive, but require a lot more maintenance and usually more costly. And then you have aquaponics. That's where you have fish that the waste from the fish is then pumped up as part of the nutrient solution to the plant. So it's supposed to be a complete system. And it's very difficult to maintain. I've seen a lot of systems where the fish ended up dead because dissolved oxygen got out of whack, and you got to be really careful about that. So that is probably not only the most expensive, but also one of the hardest systems to get up and to keep running. So that is not for the faint of heart, and that is for somebody who's an expert. So this is just what they look like. You'll have, your aeroponics, your ebb and flow, nutrient film, that kind of thing. And then conclusions. So this is open to anybody. I mean, anyone can do this, either really super hard stuff or really super easy stuff. I mean, it is really nice to have fresh herbs and plants in the middle of winter when nothing's growing outside, and you can totally do that. In fact, some people bring it in and do it during the winter time so they get the fresh herbs, and then they go plant them outside the spring and just continue that way. And they don't really have the plants in the house in the summertime because you don't need it. You've got outside. So lots of options. Grow lights, easy peasy. I mean, really, if you need help, you can always reach out to Extension. We've got always have lots of options there for helping folks, and lots of good webinars for helping also if you just want to check it out on your own. Container choices, it totally customizable. Do whatever makes you happy. And, I am a big proponent of mental health, and gardening is probably one of the best and easiest, not necessarily the cheapest, but best ways to feel really good. And who doesn't want to look at kind of a green oasis? So, yeah, lots of good stuff there. So, having said all of that, we are right about where we should be for this time. So let's see if there's any questions. Um, yeah, this is not me in the mountains. It's just a Zoom background. So I am not in the mountains. It's okay. Um, it looks very realistic though. Let's see, examples of reflective light surfaces, mirrors, metals. Yes. So some type of probably a mirror or something like that. I mean, you don't have to do that. Think about like in the Wayback Machine when you were like trying to suntan and you held the reflective surface on your hand. Or if you're out and you're under an umbrella by the pool and it's reflecting off the water and it causes you to get a burn on your face. So you're just looking for something that's going to bring in more of those light wavelengths to increase the intensity. So something like that. What about fungus gnats and their larvae? What are the white fuzzy things that can grow on plants? Probably scale and mealy bugs. Yeah, they look like a Q-tip. Probably mealy bugs. So we try to limit so those little guys can hitchhike from a greenhouse and they can hitchhike from outside. Scale and mealybugs can both come from, well, and fungus gnats can all come from a greenhouse situation. So we recommend in a situation like that with the fungus gnats, you can use BT or Bacillus thuringiensis, and you just get it as it's also what mosquito dunks are. It's just a bacterium, and it's perfectly fine for us to consume. It's an organic, but it is deadly to fungus gnats. So if you catch them early, you can spray that as a liquid on the soil, and that will help control your fungus gnats. If you end up with mealybugs, there are insecticidal soap, and it's going to require a lot of checking on your part. So if you see them, you immediately want to start spraying every surface of the plant. If you have some of the more immature versions, the nymphs of those, they can go undetected because they're so small. It only takes one to come back. Life cycle is like 10 days, 10, 12 days. So you have to be very conscientious in checking and spraying with insecticidal soap or neem oil or something like that. You're probably not going to be eating your plants at that point. You may just opt to throw it all out because they can spread to your other house plants. So just be very careful about that. Rubbing alcohol. So yes, it can damage some plants. So I know some folks have wanted to use rubbing alcohol on succulents and things like that. And sometimes those are a little more tolerant because they have a really waxy coating. But if you have a very vegetative plant like basil or something along the lines of that, it can be drying, and it can it can actually cause the basil to dry up, and so you may get crispy around the edges and things like that. There's better options. So, maybe look at using insecticidal soap or neem oil, which will smother them essentially. It's a contact type of organic pesticide. With outside is intensive planting with trap plants an option. Yeah, I mean, sure, you can do that's a completely different thing. I mean, I do have some companion planting webinars that are out there. If you want to take what you've grown in the wintertime and go stick it outside in the ground, some of those herbs are great for planting next to vegetable crops and helping with trap crops. Maybe you've got some nasturtiums growing inside and you want to go take them and plant them outside, and that's a trap crop. A lot of times people will put them near cucumbers. They work great for that. And adjacent to syrups, tinctures, and shrubs are a good option. Yeah. So, I mean, you could opt to have this is just an option to have all of these things in during the winter time. You can carry it on in the summer and have stuff outside. So, I mean, there's lots of options. When garlic starts to sprout, I like to throw them in a pot and harvest garlic greens. That's an option. Yeah. Algae, a concern with hydroponics. Yeah. So usually the waste products in hydroponic situations, you get algae, and in aquaponics, you get a buildup of the waste products and algae. So those systems it's hard to keep them balanced. You probably want to try something that is a little easier first and move up in difficulty. I might do a aquaponics and hydroponics webinar later. But right now, sticking with some very simple systems where literally you can get something like a 5-gallon bucket and you cut a little hole out of the top, you get the nutrient solution, you can grow lettuce in the wintertime and have fresh greens. You don't have to go down and spend a ton of money at the grocery store. And it's very easy to do. Something simple like that. Yes, we had this at Mason. Yes. There are a lot of grow towers that are floating about Gwinnett County that they got used for a little while and then are now at senior centers or in a closet somewhere because they do require cleaning and they do require flushing and maintenance, and a lot of people weren't really interested in all that extra work. So, and I know I've had teachers that have shown interest in those, but unfortunately, they were all purchased using grant money, and that grant money was very specific to the senior centers, and so they can't send them over to the schools. So, sad as it might be, I work with them periodically. Sometimes we'll get one director that really would like to get one up and running, and we'll do that. But then that person leaves, and then they end up back in the closet. So, yeah, will you do a module on aquaponics perchance? Possibly. So, like I said, I take suggestions, and that is something I probably would bring one of the specialists on for a lunch and learn. They do them periodically for us as employees so that we're aware of that if we have any constituents in the county that have systems like that. But I probably would be happier to bring somebody on who actually knows more about those systems. I just know, the overview and roughly how they work and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'll send me an email, and that way it'll get in my radar, and I will work with one of the specialists over at UGA to do one in one of the upcoming cycles, maybe next summer. We run on like 3 to 6 months out, so I've already got my stuff set up for through May. Would you consider adding the YouTube link to your signature moving forward? Uh, that's there right now. So if you look at the slide that is up right now and you see the QR code, that's for the YouTube channel. And then the one on the left is for our classes. Oh, email signature. I'm very limited in what I can put in my email signature at work. The county really keeps us to a set thing. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you probably understand. Okay, mealybugs. Yeah. Um, yeah, always look for integrated pest management. You want to figure out when the easiest time to treat pests is. And generally, that is going to be in the nymph stage when they are very soft bodied, small, and very susceptible to pesticides. When they're adults, they're harder to treat. And when they're eggs, they are almost impossible to treat. So that nymph stage, when they're in that crawler stage, is the easiest time to treat. And most of your organics are going to smother them. So that's when you want to get them. So you got to be very diligent life cycle tracking to know when that is dipping. Yeah. So this is being recorded, and I might have enough time to get it up there tomorrow, but I've got a bunch of other stuff. So we'll see. I'm trying to get my next Master Gardener class all situated. So it either tomorrow or early next week will probably be. Um, Algae in a aquaponic system is more function of the nutrients that are there because the algae is a plant just like the plants you're trying to grow. It's using the nutrients. Towers are great, but yes, lots of work. Um, Jessica, if you want to email your questions, we can probably talk more about aquaponics and hydroponics there. And I think it probably makes sense to have a webinar on that. So I will definitely send me an email with that stuff, and I will work on getting a specialist, which we do. We also have, if anybody's interested, we've got a muscadine pruning workshop at Vines Community Garden Park, part of Harvest Gwinnett's Park in Loganville on Saturday at 11 a.m. So if you are interested in learning more about pruning muscadines or getting them and starting some new vines, pruning old ones, we'll have that going on. That's free to attend. We'll also have some of our FACS personnel there, Family and Consumer Sciences, with some type of interesting appetizer, some little grape cream cheese ball. Oh, yummy. Anyway, that is basically it. So again, there's my email address. The YouTube link is in that QR code on the right. The classes is on the left. And if you have a desire for the slide deck, you can email me at this email address. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate you all coming. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and have a nice evening. Appreciate